Hey guys, welcome back. So today on Modern Masters Auto, my best friend Russell Eugene Baker is about to tackle this M156. This is going to be very easy day for Rusty. This is going to be a very easy tutorial for you guys, and we're just trying to, really push this out there because even though we already have videos on this, you guys are still messing it up. I'm seeing it on the forums, I'm seeing it on the Facebook pages, I'm seeing it on Instagram, so I don't want to be seeing that no more. Watch this video, listen to the man. All right, so Rusty is going to rebuild the Cam Phaser plates with new VRP plates, a new pin, new spring, all that good stuff. And we're gonna be putting in VRP cams. Everything else will be stock and it'll be tuned just for the cams. The customer didn't want nothing crazy. He just wanted it stock, but he don't want to find himself in this position again with used cams or OEM cams. The VRP cams are hardened and we're gonna get a little bit of performance out of it. The tune today is brought to you by VTech. I'll put their name below. The cams by VRP. Check out VRP at vrpspeed.com. You can also purchase this tune at vrpspeed.com, or you can reach out to us. So let's get the cams in, let's get these cam phasers on, let's watch Rusty do it all because I have to do. So let's get started. All right guys, and first thing we noticed, this car is immaculate. Somebody went ham on the pressure washer, really made this thing clean. Couple things you can tell if a car is naturally clean or if they use the pressure washer. You can see this piece is missing, so they blew that off. This looks even like a replacement reservoir, and they still blew that off. With the felt being pushed down like this and pushed back like that and pushed like that, you can tell they really went ham on cleaning it because I don't care what year or mileage your car is, they are never this clean. You're gonna get road debris and gunk and all that stuff, but look how clean this is. They did a heck of a job, and if it's running safely, there's no issue with that, but this thing was definitely cleaned very well. You can see how shiny, I mean, there's some dust on there, but see how shiny that intake manifold is. Another sign that they cleaned it. This looks new. You can see the color difference from the airbox to the front engine cover here. That's a new one. That looks beautiful. You can get those at FCP Euro. So you want to check out FCP Euro. And then look at this. See how this is white and this is black right here? That's also from a power washer. This is all being white right here, and then it goes to black. Yeah, they went ham with the power washer on this thing. But now we are going to go ham putting in appropriate new parts. Looks like they power washed the bolt out of here. I'm just kidding, I have no idea why it's like that. Rusty pointed that out and I noticed it as well, that bolt was missing. But you've already pulled this apart too, Rusty? Yeah. Okay, yeah, Rusty did pull this apart for the inspection. He just lifted the valve covers to find out the cams were bad and play in the phaser plates when we did our detailed inspection. So we know that stuff's bad, but he'll get that apart and I'll show you how they're bad. And then we will time this bad boy and tune it and shoot it down the road.
All right, we're gonna start off by getting our fender covers on because I'm about to make a big old mess. Go ahead and get our coil packs unclipped and unbolted. It's a T25. Get all these cool packs out of here. And before I take the valve covers off, I'm going to set the crankshaft at 40 degrees on the balancer, and I'm going to take this serpentine belt off so that whenever I take these front cam covers off, no oil or anything ruins this belt. Because the belt looks like it's in pretty good shape, we'll be able to reuse that. And with the belt out of the way, we can really see the markings on the crank much easier. So I'm going to turn this around until I see that 40. Make sure to be careful that your ratchet doesn't bust this line off the thermostat. I've seen that happen a few times. All that plastic gets very brittle, so just be cautious. Alright, we have the crank set at 40 degrees. See if I can get you down here and get a good shot at it. Ooh. So you can see right there where that orange mark is. I put an orange paint mark on there because on this crank it was a little bit harder to read than they usually are, and you're going to line it up with the timing cover, that notch, it's right there, right above it, but it does say a 40 right there where I drew that orange mark. Just make sure it's lined up, and then you're good to proceed with removing the cams. And what that does is it sets the engine so none of the pistons are the entire way up. That way, whenever we take the cam gears off the cams and things move and settle, you're not going to risk a valve contacting a piston and damaging things. So it's really nice that Mercedes does that, because a lot of other manufacturers, their timing spot is at 0 degrees top dead center, and you do run that risk. If you would turn any of the camshafts, it would damage a piston. So let's keep on going. Next, I just need to get these valve covers off of here. There is a bracket on either side of the cylinder head to help secure this harness here. It's a T30 that will come right out of the way. And then all we need is a pick tool to help pop up this harness. And I'm going to be popping the evap hose out of this connection right here, just so I can get that out of the way a little bit better. A lot of times when we do cams, we're also taking the intake manifold off, so I don't have to worry about this because I'm taking the intake off as well. But in this case, the intake is staying on there, so I gotta get that sucker out of the way. So that gives me plenty of room, get that valve cover off. And even though we're not removing the intake, as preventative maintenance, we are going to be replacing the fuel injectors, and this looks like it's going to be fun. Looks like some JB Weld on there, holding that fuel rail bolt in. It is pretty common for the bolts to get corroded in here and that manifold to start to crack from corrosion. It's happened to me quite a few times, but I'm hoping that JB Weld is not physically holding that bolt in there, or I'm going to have a very long day ahead of me. But I'm just going to keep on moving with the cams, and we'll worry about that bolt later. All of these exterior bolts are pretty easy to zip out of there with my electric ratchet, and I leave these back to a line. It's real tight back here. I just had to get them out by hand. You could probably fit something back here if you really tried, but it's only 2 bolts. Ta-da! So just be careful. These are usually captured in here pretty well, but sometimes they do pop out, and just be very careful that none of those drop into the engine. Also keep in mind where these guys end up, the spark plug tube seals. There's 3 here, and there's 1 still that's stuck into the valve cover gasket. I've seen many of these drop down into the oil pan, and whenever we go to reseal oil pan or even a rebuild, there's a black crusty one of these jammed up into the pickup screen because knowing that someone wasn't paying attention doing a valve cover gasket, and it fell down and worked its way down into the oil pump. Alright, so this valve cover is out, and check this out. Big old crack there. Looks like someone tried to smear some probably JB Weld at the same time they JB Welded the intake there. But this is really common on these. They do crack. They are just plastic. When we first started getting into working on these years and years ago, Craig probably put 4 or 5 valve cover gaskets on his E63 until we saw, this is obvious, but he didn't see it until he went outside, held his valve cover up into the sun, and he saw a little pinhole right about here, and that's where that oil leak is coming from. So always check yours for cracks. And they're usually back in the back corners here, typically from people over tightening them and stuff like that. But this has obviously been cracked for a while, and you can see it runs the whole way down along here. So this one was on the top, so it wasn't leaking or anything too bad. If it was on the bottom, it would be getting oil all over the exhaust, stuff like that. So just be aware of that. All right, guys, once you get the crank at 40 degrees and the valve covers are off, you want to check to see if the cams are in the correct position. And what you're going to do is come back here, and you can see this little notch in the cam. Make sure that that is level or above the cylinder head right here, because there's going to be a bar that goes in the back of this that rests on the cylinder head. If this is too low, you would need to spin the engine another full rotation, and that would turn this to get the cam on the whole way around, and it will put it in the correct position. But it'll be easier to explain once I get that bar on there later on, but just check now before you start taking everything else apart. But for right now, let's continue, and you'll see that bar once I get the new cams in there. All right, and once you've gotten down this far, say you're just replacing your valve cover gaskets, or if you have a cold start rattle, this is all you have to do to check to see if the cam plates are worn. You just get yourself a wrench that fits along the camshaft here, and you're going to just put just a little bit of pressure on there. You can see how this phaser here, the tone ring, is moving separately from the cam gear itself. It should not move. It should be nice and tight. Not a whole lot of movement in that one there. Let's check the exhaust ones. For whatever reason, the exhaust tend to take more of a beating. So yeah, we got about 1/8 inch or so of movement on that one, which is a lot considering that pin is supposed to lock in place. Let's see how the other side looks. And this car was one of the more louder cold start, especially when all the oil pressure bled down. But check this one out. So this is the intake cam on this side. Look. It basically goes as far as it wants. It is not locking at all whatsoever. A little bit of play in this here, but this one right here, that's basically worst case scenario. I've only ever seen a handful that get this bad. Basically what happens is either that pin that locks it in the phaser is sticking in the bore here, or it has completely stripped out that hole right there. So it's not locking it in place. But luckily he decided to take care of this whenever he did. Eventually that phaser will break internally. What's going to happen is a piston's going to come up and hit a valve because the cam isn't going to spin, and some of the lobes will be pushing down on a valve when that piston comes up. So this guy picked a perfect time to get this done. This could have been catastrophic. So I'm excited to get that one apart to see what is inside. Now I'll be taking off these VVT solenoids and the cam covers. Well, cam gear covers, I should say. Make sure you unplug your camshaft position sensors. And I went ahead and stuffed some pig mats down here after I took the belt off, just to catch any kind of oil drips to come down. It's usually not too much, but better be safe than sorry. You don't want to make a giant mess. And just gently wiggle this off of here. And there you go. Now just let that guy rest right there for right now. And now we move on to the other side. I'm a little confused as to why a bolt is missing on this side. Probably from the same person that decided to JB weld the valve cover gasket instead of replacing it. And the driver's side has a little bit less room in the front to get to everything because of the power steering pump lines. So once I get the obvious ones out of the way, I like to get in there with the hand tools just so there's a little bit more room. Also makes it easier if you pop off the connectors to the sensors, and you can try to get that entire harness out of the way of the bolts for you. These suckers are on here tight. Must have over tightened all the other ones just to make up for that one that's missing. These suckers are on there. And someone's definitely done some work to this because I see that all of the intake bolts are brand new. It's a clean car, just a couple errors were made whenever they were trying to refresh everything. But if they did the cams then or tappets, and they did a good job doing that, it was at least in time, which most people messed that up, getting everything back in time. And let's wiggle this side off of here. Being very careful not to nick anything. Like I said, there's a lot less room on this side. And we're gonna get that guy folded out of the way. All right, now that we have these front plates off, let's take a second look at this phaser, just because, well, honestly, it's just fun to do. Check that sucker out. Oh boy. So I don't think it's physically possible for the piston to hit a valve as long as this is all the worse it gets, because this is just from that pin not being seated inside of that phaser. And this is the normal amount of travel that the ECU controls whenever you're driving the car. So that's just, you know, advancing and retarding the position of the camshaft. But what's going to happen is eventually it will break internally even more, and this will be able to spin a 360, which is bad news. Alright, now that the front covers are off, we can put our locking tool in. It's going to slide right over the cam right there. Thread some bolts in. If you don't have any bolts to use with your tool, Torx that you took out of the front here will also work perfectly in that. And I bought 2 of these tools just so I can speed things up by having one on both sides, because we do a ton of these. And when I say I bought 2 of these, Craig bought 2 of these. All right, now that it's secured, we can get our 18mm on here, break these bolts loose. Alright, now we can take this back off. And another thing to watch when you take these phasers off, always check that this washer stayed inside of that phaser. If that sticks to the cam here, it can fall down into your timing area and you're gonna have a bad time. Alright, same thing on this side. Bust these bolts loose. There's some carnage in here, I think. Get this brace off of here, and then we can remove the cams. All right, now we can take the cams out. I always start by taking off this very front brace. Well, cam cap, not a brace. You just want to evenly start to loosen the caps, and I'll work my way to the center. I'll leave the center cap for last. And that'll help keep the cam nice and centered, and it won't bind up when it tries to come out. And you also want to make sure that you keep the cam caps in order. They are numbered, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and it's the opposite on the other side. So just pay attention to that. If you do mix up the numbers, what can happen is it can cause the cam to bind, and you'll get some codes and a couple misfires, and you have to take these off and redo this part.
Good morning, Vietnam! How goes it?
I almost had the first cam out.
Almost have the first cam out. Today, Junior.
Let's take a look. The exhaust cam was in pretty good shape, but if you can see this lobe right here, she is smoked on the end. So it's breaking apart, grabs your fingernail, and it's just tearing up the tappet underneath that. This one's pretty bad too. There's quite a few that have some wear. See that little rust chipping apart there? I don't know if it's really rust, but that's what happens when it starts to flake at the end, and that's what digs into your tappet. And then before you know it, it eats through the tappet, and then you got big problems. So there's another one. All right, let's get the other side apart. Actually, I'm gonna pop this tappet out real quick, just because I just saw it. This is the tappet from that really worn side on there. Look at where it was just starting to eat in there. Starting to collapse in the center a little bit. So this is what happens. The cam starts to flake apart and it just slowly eats away at the tappet. And before you know it, there's a hole there and it will eventually eat through all of this. This will spit out, get flying all over the inside of the engine. It can even start eating through the top of the valve. So definitely good timing for all this. All right, let's check this one out. Got a little bit of speckles here and there on the edge of these cams, this one here in particular. And it's typically the intake cams that take the beating the most. So not nearly as bad as the other one, but there is some wear on here. You can see the specks on the end where it's starting to flake apart, catches your fingernail, feels like sandpaper. Yeah, look at that one right there. Whew. Not no more. Got the fresh VRP cams now. All right, all the cams are out, and I can start taking these tappets out of here. It always is fun to look at the tappets that came from the lobes with the most wear. Even just scraping these with my fingernail, these back three here are in real rough shape, especially this furthest one back. All of the exhaust ones are in decent shape, but sometimes they can wear too, so we're just replacing all of them. All right, we're gonna start rebuilding the cam phasers now that everything is out of the vehicle. So they are a little slippery, so I'm wearing gloves just to help hold it still. Take these guys out of here. I like to do them one at a time just so I can make sure nothing gets mixed up or the backing plates don't get switched around. So be very careful with this guy. I know it's hard to see in my glove. A little plastic piece that pops off this spring right here. Usually it just sticks to the inside of this, but it goes on top of that spring right there. Very important. They like to shoot out of there and go halfway across the shop and then you never find them again. So actually, let me get a pig mat to soak some of that oil up. Alright, so now we can take off the bottom piece here. And you just push up to separate the two pieces here. So we'll have a spring. There'll also be a dowel in here. Make sure you don't lose that, because unless it's worn really bad, you're going to be reusing it. So, this oil is really gross. Normally it just runs right off of here, but it's so thick and dirty. So this is one of the exhaust ones. You can see a little bit of wear right there. I remember the exhaust ones weren't too terrible, but just that little bit of movement we saw is from that wear right there where that pin is slopping around on the inside of there. So that's what's going to happen. I'm really excited to see how bad that one is that was spinning the whole way around. You don't get to see it too often, but this is pretty normal wear. That's enough to cause like the cold start rattle that everyone hears. This one had it real bad, but obviously that's from it being very, very worn. Okay, so the gloves weren't working out too great, so just gonna be raw dogging the rest of this. So what we have here is the VRP Stage 10, the hardened backing plates here for the cam phasers. These will not wear when that dowel goes in there. They're much stronger, so you'll get much more life than these bad boys right here. So I've never seen one of these wear down. I tore my own car apart probably 10,000 miles after installing a set of these, and there was zero wear, so they're definitely much stronger. So what I like to do is set these aside, and you will find the backing plate that matches the one that you took off. This is what I like to do one side at a time, because the intake will have this cutout here over here. So they will fit, it will go on to the other one. So what will happen is you can mix these up and you'll have an intake on the exhaust, and they'll turn the wrong way once the oil pressure gets in there, and you'll have a misfire. So you just gotta line these up. There's a little pin hole right here. You're gonna match that little pin in there up with the hole. And then get this bad boy in here. Make sure nothing's tight. Make sure it all moves nice and freely. And I'm just inspecting this pin for wear. I don't see any marks on the outside. There's any spots or it's gonna roll over. It's still nice and square. So we're gonna stick that guy down in the hole there. And then you have your spring, and then make sure you don't forget a little plastic piece, very important. So that seats the spring, and it also allows the oil flow to go in through there. So we'll put our topper back on here, the skeleton plate. Everything is seated, and then we're just going to set it back onto the gear itself. So I just kind of spin it and I look through that hole until I see the bolt holes line back up, and then I'll put one bolt in there to hold everything down and secure, and now I can set it down and put the rest of them in. So I just kind of snug these up just to make sure that that little plastic cap inside there can't slide around, can't pop off. And then once I rebuild all of these, we'll go take them over to the vise and torque them down to spec. And really, the hardest part about working on AMGs is just getting the information, because everyone says something different. Everyone has a different source. A lot of wiring diagrams you look up, they will say it's for a 63, but it's actually for like a 500 or a 550. So you end up tracing a wire that doesn't even belong to that car or goes to the wrong place. So be very careful where you get your service information from, where you get your torque specs from. Do a lot of research. Just make sure you're getting it from a reputable source, not just some Joe Schmo who's on a forum and Google it or something, because most of the time, Google is wrong when it comes to these cars. So there's one. Move on to the next. Here's an intake. And this should be the really, really bad one. I remember seeing all that rust on there whenever I was spinning the engine over. See, that time the little plastic thing stuck inside of there, so keep an eye on that guy, because you can't get that separate. They don't sell those. That's what we like to call a Jesus pin, because when that goes flying across the room, you'll be praying to Jesus trying to find it. I'm gonna get the spring out of there, separate the two halves, get the gear off of there, pop this bad boy up. Shoo-wee! Can already see it. That is probably one of the worst ones that I've seen. Let me clean it up a little bit better so you can see. And that is about as bad as it gets. Smoked. So what you can see is happening is this pin is just laying over in there, and it's allowing that cam to move. Actually, I'll see if I can get it to move on here. So let's drop the pin in. I'll even put the spring in there, and yep, it just spins flop, flop, flop. It just lays over. It doesn't even try to grab in that hole anymore. And that's what causes that rattle, is cold start. There's no oil pressure being sent to these, and they don't really do much of idle anyway. But then once oil pressure gets in there, it kind of controls the angle of the cam. But cold start, it has no control. It's just flopping all over the place, and that's where you get that rattle from. So let's match this one up to that one there. So here is our new one. I'd say it's quite a big difference there. And we just go back together, matching the pin on this one here, this one here. Getting the wheel in there, make sure it moves nice and free. You're gonna line it up with the hole for the pin. And then I'm gonna take a closer look at this pin. Oh, see, I almost lost that guy. Look at the pin, make sure there's no wear. And actually, I don't see anything, but since this one was so bad, I don't trust it. I'm gonna grab another one from the collection that we have. Got a better pin. I'm gonna put this one over here so I don't mix it up. And then just for a little bit of show and tell, this is about half of the plates we have laying around that we've done. I think Craig has a whole box full of them stashed somewhere. We just have these on the back shelf. This is probably the ones we've done so far, maybe in the past 6 months. So we do a ton of these. So if you think, oh, your car's, you know, well maintained, we've had some beautiful cars come through here, and they all fall victim to these plates wearing. Even if everything else is perfect, it's just something that happens. So it doesn't matter how much you maintain your car, it's just a weak metal, and there's nothing you can do about it. But I am a little artsy and creative, so I'm trying to think of something to do with these old plates. I thought about making like a giant Flavor Flav necklace or something like that, weld them together, make something cool. So if you have a good idea of something I can make with some old AMG parts and welding some things together, like these tappets, stuff like that, put it in the comments, and if I think it's cool, I'll try to make it. So let's keep going. Got this thing nice and free in there. Get our replacement pin, drop down in the hole, and then get the spring back in there. And then the cover. I'm gonna go over to the parts cleaner real quick and just try to clean this rust off, just so it looks nice and fresh. I'll be right back. All right, all cleaned up, looking much better. You can see this one here. Once that pin's seated, there's no play in there at all whatsoever. So we're gonna smoosh down that plastic piece, the plastic Jesus piece in there. Put it down onto the gear, line up the hole. Just finger tighten these up. We're gonna torque all these down once I get to the vise and get them all done. All right, I'm gonna knock these other two out real quick and we'll get them torqued down. Good bit of wear on that one too. And then before I forget, whenever you go to reinstall these, you will look at the writing on top of here, and it will tell you whether it's an intake or exhaust, which is why it's so important to match them up with the plate that comes out. Right there, it's really hard to see with the glare on the camera there, but that ein is in. So intake, and then we have aus right there, so that's your exhaust. Doesn't matter which side it goes on, just that it is a intake or exhaust. Yep, and see this one here, it doesn't want to move very well in there, so I'm gonna take it back apart, see what's holding it up. Always make sure it moves free. It could just been me, the way I was putting it in, could be off center a little bit. On the plate in the back here, I don't see any junk on there. All right, moves nice and free now. I probably didn't have the this back plate completely centered, but it centers itself whenever you put the bolts in the top. So there's that. We got our pin, spring, plastic. And this one was an exhaust. So that's worn pretty bad for one of the exhausts. All right, last one. Oh. So I don't know if you saw that, but that just hit me in the eye. So always be super careful with taking these off. Holy cow. I wish there was another camera around here for instant replay of that one. That would hit me literally right in the eyeball. Definitely needs an oil flush in this thing. So, and then not a whole lot of wear, but definitely wear there. Even that is enough to justify replacing these plates. It hit me in the eyeball, then where did it go? I broke my golden rule. And I did my best to keep my eye on it. You know what I mean? There it is. I kept my eye on that one the whole time. Still almost lost it. This one here is actually got a little rust on it too, so I'm gonna set this on here like that. I'll go take care of this. All right, much better. Set that guy down there, hold that plastic piece in there, and you start bolting her down. All right, we just got to torque these things down. That's all there is to it. But cannot stress enough how great these VRP plates are. They are made in America, for Americans, by Americans. Very good steel. We've tried other companies outside the US, had a bunch of problems, you know, held up in customs, all kinds of stuff like that. So if you love America and bald eagles, choose VRP, get these plates. There's nothing better. Before I torque these, we're gonna get those old washers out of the back. That way you don't risk doubling them up. This is just a little straw out of a brake clean can. Stick through there, I'll pop them right out. That one, no, already fill out. All right, we're all good. Moving over to the vise to torque these. Okay, torque spec for these is 15 Newton meters. You should work your way up to that in 3 stages. And since this torque wrench has an LED display, I will take it up to 8 Newton meters, work my way around until it says 8. Then I'll just work myself in a star pattern, get to 8. And then I'll go around until I get to 12. And then again to 15. So we'll do 12 this time. There's 12, or close enough. You don't want to just go straight to 15 on one of these and not the other, because you can warp this plate and it can bind the travel of that wheel in there. So it'll end up sticking when it tries to actuate, and you'll get a check engine light and they misfire. So they're all at 12. Now let's get them to 15. Moving on to the next. And don't really crank the vise down either. I try to have it holding as lightly as possible to keep it from spinning, but I don't want to leave any marks or anything on the phaser, so we should put a rag down to protect it and just have it barely tight enough to hold it still. Just double checking a few of them since it slipped a little bit. We're good. Alright guys, so I have my container full of our precious liquid moly here, and what I'm doing is I'm taking our new tappets and I'm laying them in here upside down just to help bleed them for that initial start. I do this every time. Some people say it's necessary, some people say it does nothing. I like it, and I feel like it makes it better for the first startup, so that's all that matters. So I do it every time. I'll typically sit there and I'll watch bubbles just kind of come up there periodically. So I'm gonna let these sit in here and soak while I grab something to eat. That way they're ready to go in as soon as I get back. Bloop.
All right, guys, I'm going to Florida. You'll see me in the next video. I'll miss you guys, but I have to go pick up C63S that bent some rods in an M157. So that's gonna be coming up here, going to the machine shop, and we're going to be fixing her up. We have like 7 motors right now at the machine shop, so we are keeping them coming. But I'm going to miss you guys. Prayers for me driving safe. Actually, by the time you watch this video, I'll be back. I'm only going, it's Friday afternoon. I'll be gone for the weekend. I'll be back by Monday, so not a huge deal. Also going to stop by, see my dad again. You know, everybody prayers for him and his battle to cancer. Hopefully he wins. We just lost my grandfather like 10 years ago from it. And, you know, a lot of us are dealing with that kind of thing right now. Everybody pray for Anthony and his family. He's going through some things too with cancer. So just take a moment, pray for that. Hopefully all comes out well and everybody gets it figured out. Cancer. But yeah, I'm going to Florida. Hope you have a good time with Rusty and this very monotone, boring video. He'll be doing the cam plates and we've already done them. But when you watch the cam plate part, just know those cam plates were made in America, not a northern part of America, from a company we no longer deal with because, you know, they had to try to bash us on Instagram because I said the wrong manufacturer cam plates. I said they were VRP and those particular set weren't. But guess what? Now I no longer recommend them for multiple reasons other than that, but it's just a very immature way to do business. To bash somebody and refuse to ship parts here for other customers because I didn't say they're specifically your cam plates. And I even told him, I was like, oh, in the next video I'll mention that we use your cam plates, but then he decided to bash me on social media and just make a fool of himself, and he made a fool of himself to several of my customers, and they're like, I don't even know why he's, you know, talking about your YouTube video when I'm just trying to buy parts from him. I'm like, I don't know either, guy. All I know is now we get all of them from VRP. You know, we try to spread the wealth, share the love, but instead I will just support my best friend's company, and we will use all the ones made in America and a company that we deal with every day, and we actually warranty stuff without crying about it. So yeah, made in America. We love it. We love the stuff. Stay away from that Canadian grasso stuff. We don't need it. We don't like it. And yeah, man, there they are actually right here.
No, it's his old ones.
That's what I'm saying. And they were bad. Look how terrible they were.
No. Stay tuned.
Holy shit. See, this is what happens when you get those Canadian plates, man. That's what happens. They were probably made in Canada by some really mean Instagram Canadians. Just kidding, I can't say it because I have a lot of Canadian customers and I have a lot of dear friends in Canada with 63s. But I am I wouldn't say very, I'm just a little upset about how he handled it and how he's treating my clients and my customers. You know, he can bash me all day, whatever, but when you like aren't trying to help a customer out and refuse to ship it here when we have their car just because of one YouTube thing, me not putting in that they're specifically his plates, oh well, man. Like
free healthcare just goes to their head, you know?
I know, that's what I'm saying. And the other thing is, they didn't pay me anything, no sponsorship thing, so I don't have to say their name. And me saying their VRP plates, I don't care because I do buy them from VRP also. But when VRP's inventory gets low, I would order a couple from them to kind of like, you know, even it out. Like I said, share the love, but I don't need to do that. So, and I won't now, but a shame, man. He was even rude to Rusty. Poor little Rusty.
I still haven't recovered.
Yep.
My cams are about to, though.
Yeah, we're tossing those cams out of Rusty's car, putting in some VRP cams because Rusty's car made less power than a car without cams with that particular Canadian stage 3 cams. So what can you do? And our tuner Vano really tried to tune that car to make it make power, and it just sounded cammed, but absolutely made no power. And then, you know, they said they don't weld their cams. They don't hard weld their cams. They do some other technique. And it's like, if you don't add material to the cam lobe, there's no way you can gain anything from it. No way. Like, you can flatten it out so it has like a longer duration, but if you don't add lift with duration, you'll lose horsepower. But maybe that guy just needs to go back to cam school or whatever. I don't know. But you need to add lift and duration when you make cams. Kind of just like basic knowledge. And I'm not an engineer by any means. Phil is from VRP, and he knows all that. That's why his cams rock. My car makes more horsepower than the Canadian comparison, so. All right, I'm going to get off my totem pole here, or what is it called when you're on?
Your high horse?
Not a high horse.
Your pedestal.
Close. It's close. I don't know what it is. But good luck, guys. I already tuned this car, so it's ready to go with its rocking new cams. See you on the next one.
All right, time to start popping these old tappets out of here. Easiest way is to grab a magnet, and I like to hang on to these old tappets. We are running a little low. We're down to only one 5-gallon bucket. I like to try and keep 2 on hand at all times, but we're getting a little low, so I'm gonna try to replenish our stock with these. Whenever the Tappet man comes to town, I trade him a bucket of Tappets for a Gatorade. Intake and exhaust are all the same. Just make sure to go in and slide in easily. I have had one where some of the coating was on the side and it was sticking a little bit, so you don't want that to be causing a valve to hang open. So just make sure they twist and spin and fall in nice and easy. All right, yeah, that back one's a little tight. That's what I was afraid of. So I'm gonna spend some time with that, maybe switch it out with another Tappet and see what I can do. Or, I mean, sometimes it's just from the oil being on there, and just gotta move it around a couple times, but that one wants to stick, and I definitely don't want that to stick and cause a valve to be stuck open. So I'm gonna spend some time with that and see what I find. Okay, so I switched to Tappets. I took the Tappet that was sticking in the back there, moved it up front. I put this front one the whole way in the back. It went in there nice and smooth, no problems. But the one that was in the back that was sticking was also sticking in this hole, so I deemed that one as defective. So luckily I had an extra in stock. We have a couple sets here we keep in stock at all times, and then I'll just have to warranty that one out. But I'm going to use this one for right now. It's just so we can get this guy's car back. And yeah, so always be wary of defective parts. We get them from everywhere, every manufacturer. These are OEM, straight from Mercedes, and that's probably the first one of those I've actually seen that is sticking that bad. So, but always keep an eye out. Never think, oh, you know, it's Mercedes, it's a dealer part, it's never going to fail or be defective, but it happens all the time. It's just part of the mechanic world. And here we have our stage 2 VRP cams. Cannot stress to you guys enough how awesome these cams are. We've tried every other manufacturer, every which way possible. There was a stocking issue with these for a while, so we were trying any option just to get any kind of cams into people's cars so they could have their car back. But stocking has been much better with these, and I can't really blame them for being out of stock because these are awesome. Like Craig said, eventually I will do a video of putting these in my E63 just to see a horsepower gain because I wasn't happy with the last cams that we had. But these over stock are awesome. And then when you add boost, it takes it to a whole nother level. But these cams are just great for just even daily drivability. It sounds like it's a cam, but it drives like it's stock. Nothing but good things to say about these. They're hardened, so you won't get that wear on the tips anymore like the factory cams. And once again, I know I'm kind of bragging about this now, but made in America for Americans. And it's hard not to be proud, just and get a little patriotic just looking at them. So let's take a step back and just admire the flag and these cams and be proud of our freedoms and proud of these cams. All right, so now we have our liquid moly assembly lube we always use. A little dab of Duya. These come pre-coated, but I still like to be safe and lube up all of these cams and the journals. And I'll go around, smear them around by hand once I get a free hand, if I don't run out. Luckily we have plenty more of this stuff. So when I'm putting these in, I like to go ahead and put them in order on a bench so I don't have to think about it too much. And just match up the part number and the order of the old cams. So this is the exhaust cam. I matched it up with the cams that came out just to make sure they go in the same order. You can't switch them and mix them up head to head, but you would be able to mix up and put an intake cam where an exhaust cam goes on the same head. So definitely check these part numbers, make sure you're putting it in the right spot. But I'm gonna go ahead and get this one lubed up and we'll get it set into the cylinder head. All right, so like I explained before, here's a better picture of that half moon that's in the back. You want the smaller half on the top. So whenever you put this engine at 40 degrees, make sure that smaller half here is pointing up on the cam. That way you can get that bar in there. It's gonna go between here to lock it down. So we're gonna do the same thing. We're going to lay it in here. Now it's not gonna wanna lay it perfectly in place, but just get it close to where that half moon is pointing up. We'll get it in there. I just need to grab those cam caps and make sure you're keeping these in order. The same order they came out in, they need to go on. Even when I do head gasket jobs on these, and if we send these heads out to either get ported or they'll go to machine shop just to get cleaned up and resurfaced, I usually just take these caps off and I will store them in a container with the customer's name on it. That way the machine shop doesn't take them off and mix them up and get them out of order or switch, you know, a one from this side isn't gonna fit a one from this side. So I try to keep them separate so they don't get lost or mixed up, and that way when we get those heads back from the machine shop, everything goes on perfect and I don't risk the camshaft sticking. Because that's what will happen is if the cap isn't mated to the head, the tolerance will be too tight for the cam and it'll start to stick. Alright. Grab the other cam. We're just loosely putting these in here for right now until I can torque them down. This one's not going to want to lay down very flat because it is pushing down 2 different cylinders of valves at the same time, so it is going to be tighter. So what I do is I just get it close and then I'll move it into position with a wrench once I'm ready to time it. So we're going to put that half moon up and see where it wants to lay and be friendly, which it looks like nowhere today apparently. So I'll get that on there to get it safe. All right, now that all our caps are just loosely on there, I like to go around and just start them by hand just to get everything kind of seated, make sure the cam moves freely, and then I'll start the torque process. But I always start these bolts just by hand, just so to make sure that they're going in smoothly, they're not cross-threaded, anything like that. It is a little harder to tell back here because of that tension from the cam, so just be careful. You just want good, steady, even pressure until this cam is seated the whole way in the head. Like I said, this is really the only one you have to worry about this with. The others lay down pretty flat. And then there you feel that pop. That means the tappets are starting to move. It's starting to compress that valve spring. It'll start getting a little easier to torque these down. Whew, that took long enough. All right, so the other ones are super easy. Not nearly as much to compress as that cam right there. Again, starting from the inside, work your way to the outside. Just make a few rounds. Don't just crank them down the whole way. All right, guys, now that we have the cam caps in here seated and the cams are laying flat, we're going to torque everything down. Here I have a torque wrench to 10 Newton meters, starting from the inside here. So we're going to get these to 10 Newton meters. I go slow, don't just go in there and crank it to try and make it to go to 10. Go nice and easy because we are still compressing the valve springs on some of these cams. So there's a 10, 10. I'll work my way down here. And we're basically just working our way from the inside to the outside. I always save the double cap in the front here for last. Same torque spec on that one. Again, just going slow. Okay, and now for a very important part that no one else will ever show you. Anytime you install these cams, you want to grab a wrench. Once everything's torqued down, you want to make sure everything moves freely. So see how that one's kind of binding there a little bit? That's a little concerning. I'm going to try to get to move a little bit better by working that lubrication in here. I might have to pop these caps off because what happens is sometimes when you get a brand new camshaft, those caps have been worn into the old cam. So there could be some carbon buildup. There's some cam material that has been put onto those caps, and it can cause a tighter tolerance, and then that cam doesn't want to spin. But this one's kind of tricky because, like I said before, it's pushing down these valves here right now and these. There's a lot of tension in that one spot. Sometimes that's all it is, but I've also had cars where that cam will bind. It doesn't damage the engine or anything, but it will cause that phaser to stick open and it won't allow it to spring back, and it will cause a misfire. So if you just did cams on your car and you have a variable valve timing code for any of the phaser correlations, it's probably not out of time. It's probably one of these cams sticking. You might have to take these caps off and polish them, which hopefully I don't have to do today, but I will have to. So this one's moving nice and free. I'll work this one back and forth a little bit more, try to get that assembly lube in there. It's moving okay, but I think it's also sticking on that coating that comes with those VRP cams. But I might loosen a few of those just to see what's going on. But first I'm gonna go ahead and torque the other side, and we'll come back to this side later. Now let's see how this side feels. Nice and smooth. This one here is also nice and smooth. So it makes me a little concerned about this one here because he's pretty tight. And that other exhaust cam on that side is also compressing 2 cylinders at the same time. And it's not nearly binding this much. So now you really get to learn today. This really only happens if you're putting in brand new cams. If you're running into this problem and you're putting your old cams back into your car, most likely your issue is you didn't put the cam caps in the right order. But we know that we did that today correctly, so let's see if there's any carbon buildup or anything like that underneath one of these cams. So what I like to do is I'll pop one cam cap loose and then see if it feels any better. You're just barely popping it loose. Also, be careful of your coolant reservoir here. Make sure you don't bust that open. Pop that one right there loose. It's starting to feel a lot better. See how it just sprung real easy when I took that one off? So I might have to clean these caps up a little bit. Yeah, that's pretty effortless. So I'm gonna pop some of these caps off. We'll take a look. I'll see if I have to polish them or anything like that. That happens sometimes. Or if I just need to put a little bit more lube on there, but we'll see. All right guys, so I took the cam caps off one at a time, inspected them, put them back on. That way it keeps that cam seated. But the very middle one there is the only one I saw any kind of issue with. And if you look here, you'll definitely see some scoring and some heat marks along this inside edge there. So if I feel with my finger, it's just barely lifted up there. Doesn't seem like much here, but once you torque that down onto that cam, that's gonna add that extra material and bind that cap up. So I'm gonna see if I can polish this. Worst case scenario, I do have extras here. I can match it up with the same casting number and get it fixed. But I'm gonna try to polish this, clean it up, and then re-torque that cam down and see how it plays out. I've had worse situations. There's been before I've had to polish every cap on the engine because of just oil deposits and debris it's built up from just lack of oil change and hard carbon deposits on the caps. You gotta polish all that out of there, and that way it will glide smoothly on the cam. So I'm gonna clean this up and then we'll see what we got. All right guys, so I got the cam cap back from the machine shop, looking much better. And by machine shop, I mean I sat in a chair for 30 minutes and polished this thing until it was absolutely perfect. So I'm gonna put some lube on that bad boy and see what we got. You can even notice how much it cleaned up just from me wiping it down. All right, I do have to torque these all again. All right, better, but still a little tight right here. Wear that in just a little bit. I still think we have problems somewhere, man. All right, I guess I'll keep checking some more. Okay guys, so after about an hour or so trial and error, polishing all these caps, I ended up taking all the tappets out and torquing these down. And as you can see, spins freely. All right guys, so today's the next day. I was here until 8 o'clock last night, polishing these cam caps, trying to get everything to move freely and perfect as much as possible. Like I said, this does happen sometimes. Craig and I have even discussed, anytime we install new cams in a higher mileage engine, just to make the polishing just mandatory. So typically it's been, probably 1 out of every 4 we've put new cams in, whether they're OEM or aftermarket or anything. You can run into this problem. Basically the old cam cap wears into the old cam and they'll bond together, kind of like a brake pad and a rotor. So you put the brand new cam in there that hasn't been worn to the cap, or actually the cap hasn't been worn to the cam actually, and it can kind of bind and stick a little bit. So a little bit of polishing, well, a lot of polishing, and you can just keep polishing until it's smooth. You don't want to use like real heavy grit sandpaper or anything like that. You're just trying to polish it. It doesn't take much. The problem is, especially with this cam in particular, it's fighting 2 cylinders of a spring pressure at the same time, so it's really pushing up on those cam caps more so than any of the other cams are. So even just a little bit of resistance on one of these cam caps with that spring pressure on there, it's going to want to stick just because it's really pushing up against that cap. So you want it to be as smooth and lubricated as possible. So everything's moving smooth now. We're going to go ahead and start timing this to get it back together. I'm gonna try to be smart today and wear some gloves, even though chances are I'll probably take them back off in 20 minutes and I'll forget about them for the rest of the day and be filthy again. So this is the bar I was talking about that goes into the back of the cam to lock it. So we're gonna get that into place. It just lays against the cylinder head back here, and you will get the cam into position. Sometimes the coating on the cam can make it a little tricky to get in there. And then once the bottom one's locked, you'll turn the top one into position, and he'll pop in there too. So now that's holding the cams in time so that we can get our phasers back on there. Okay, so we have our locking tool, locking the cam gear teeth into place here. They are spring loaded, so you want it to be all matched up. That's what this tool does, is holds it together so you can slide it back into place. And then we have our new friction washer, which will go in the back here. And we have a new bolt that goes to the front. And one thing that is very important to check, these seals right here. So you'll see these little rings. Sometimes they can get old and crack. You really got to pay attention. I just did one 2 weeks ago. I almost put together. It was just barely cracked, and as soon as I kind of gave it any kind of spring, tension at all, it fell apart into pieces. So you'll end up with a variable valve timing code. It won't be able to send oil pressure to the cam phaser if you don't have one of those rings in there, or if one's broken. So definitely pay attention to that. And then always make sure you have the correct cam gear going in. So AUS, which is exhaust, and we'll put that onto the exhaust cam. Alright, I'll get a wrench just to snug that up. You don't want to tighten these yet. This is just to hold it on there. We want to still be able to move that tone ring around freely, because that's the next step of the timing process. So I'll back it off just a little bit. Take our tool off, and then move on to the intake cam. Once again, new washer, new bolt, and this one is ein. So intake. Alright, so now that we have the cam gears on there and the locking tool is out of the way, we can put this bar back on, and this will lock our cams into place. And it's nice and sturdy, and it's going to hold the cam so that we can torque these bolts. Basically, the purpose of that little bar in the back is just to hold the cams in time until you can get that bar on there. Once that bar's on there, the back one doesn't really matter. If you would try to torque these bolts with just that back bar on there, it's going to snap those ears off the back of the cam. I've seen cam cores and stuff come in with the ears snapped off in the back. I was like, oh, well, that's what someone did. Someone didn't put the front bar on there when they torqued them. So what I like to do is, once I get some bolts in here and I get ready to torque these down, I will typically take that bar out, because it's going to get so much slack when we torque these down that it's going to fall, and I don't like having to dig it out from one of these people's cars. So I just take the bar out, because that's how I lost the other one I used to have. So I'm down to just one. Take it out, or you torque it, because it's not necessary. Okay, now we have our cam gears on there. We're going to time the tone rings that are in the front part of the cam. So you're going to match this plate up. So there's an intake and an exhaust. So it's going to go just like this. It's also reversible, so you would turn it and that would take care of the other side. But like I said, I have two of these just to help speed things up. So just like you saw me doing there, you're just going to spin these until they lock into place. It can only go on one way. You can't mess it up. It will only allow you to seat this if they are exactly where they need to be. So I'll go ahead and bolt this side down. And now we'll do the same to the other side. And now we just grab our torque wrench and an 18mm socket. All right, torque spec for the cam gear bolt is 45 Newton meters and then a 90-degree turn. So this is why I like to just go ahead and lock both sides. I can just go down the line and torque these. So 45 Newton meters, which is not much at all. And then a 90-degree turn. So we have 90 degrees. So my torque wrench does it for me. You don't absolutely have to do this. I mean, you can use, a protractor if you want. I've seen people zip tie a phone with an angle app on their smartphone, zip tie it to the ratchet, and they'll keep the angle for you. But you definitely need that 90-degree turn. I already started that one a little bit and I messed up, so I don't want to go full 90. I went about 80 degrees on that one since my torque wrench wasn't counting. Alright, so that's all you need to do to get this thing in time. We can now take all of these brackets and tools off of here and just start putting the engine back together. If you really wanted to, you could, at this point, once you get all these brackets off, you could turn the engine over a few times with a socket on the crank pulley just to make sure you don't have any piston to valve clearance issues, just to make sure that you have everything in time perfectly. But I do this probably at least twice a week, so I am confident that it is perfect. All right, so now we can put our covers on the front. We're going to change this gasket here. Craig and I call them the squiggly gaskets because they are squiggly. Just be careful that you're not folding over any of those rings that go on those phasers. Fits in there nice and snug. Now we'll move on to the other side. All right, we'll get all these bolts in here, zip these down, and we'll get the valve covers on. All right, we'll zip these down in here. I had to get that one by hand. I'm gonna go back through and tighten all these by hand. And I also replaced that missing one that was here. All right, they're all set. Now we can go ahead and put our valve covers back on. All right, we have our new, not cracked valve cover here, if it would focus for me. And the new valve covers from Mercedes also come with all the bolts and gaskets installed, which makes it nice. All right, we'll get this guy snugged down. There's always that one I can't get with the ratchet, so we're gonna go around and tighten them all up by hand anyway. We have our driver's side valve cover with new gaskets and tube seals. Take your time laying these on here. The tube seals do like to fall off sometimes. And this side is a little tight. Alright, looks like we're good. And while we have the coils off, we are going to go ahead and replace the spark plugs, and then we'll put the harness back on, coils back on, and I'm probably going to start it first before I change the injectors, just to make sure everything is good. And then we'll get those injectors off of there, change the oil, and he's all set. All right, let's get the plugs out of here and see how they look. Yeesh. Definitely been a while, definitely some oil in there. But he's getting a catch can, so that's gonna take care of that. Let's get them all out of there. Definitely a little rich. Better than lean though. All right guys, new spark plugs going in. One quick tip that you might not know is most modern spark plugs, you do not want to use anti-seize. They're already coated from the manufacturer so they don't corrode. So a lot of times if you put anti-seize on a newer spark plug, more like a modern style spark plug like NGKs or Mercedes factory plugs, you risk the chance of over torquing them because now they are lubricated thanks to the anti-seize. So there's no need to put anti-seize on there. They're not gonna seize up. This isn't an old small block Chevy, anything like that. That is a thing of the past. I'm gonna keep zipping these in here and then we'll get the coils back on and hopefully we're done. Because it's now 3 o'clock on a Saturday and I do not want to be here all night. All right guys, so I have the serpentine belt back on. I have all the coil packs bolted down, and I think I'm gonna go ahead and change out these injectors, just so everything's one and done. And I'm also going to throw a catch can back there. That way all I do is start this thing up, change the oil, and this guy's good to go. All right guys, running tight on time today, so I just went ahead and switched these out, but you can see they all match. They are all OEM injectors. They're all the same color. I'm not really sure what was going on with the last ones. I don't know if the last shop got them off of Facebook Marketplace or something, but that's a first for me. I've never seen you know, multiple different brands and age injectors mixed up together, especially on one of these. I could see if like an experienced shop, they had a misfire on one cylinder and they replaced just that one injector, you know, that would maybe make sense. I've seen people do that a few times. But generally speaking, if you have one injector failing, just go ahead and do them all. But I guess if someone was in a pinch, you know, that would get them running that day. But yes, so far this car has been just full of surprises. I went ahead and just knocked out the catch can. Took me a little longer than I thought too. It's a little tight back here on these E-classes. I'm gonna have to make a little bracket to mount it to the back of that firewall there, but I'm going to just leave it there for right now, just for this video, and then I will make a bracket here shortly. And I went ahead and made sure that the air box was going to fit. So now we can pop that air box back off of there. I'm gonna put the rubber insulators over top of the fuel injectors, and then we can start this thing up for the first time. All right guys, I'm ready for the first startup. I don't know about you, but I am excited to hear what these VRP Stage 2 cams sound like with a completely factory exhaust. This is a new one for me, so let's see what we got. Just as I thought, sounds almost completely stock, which I'm glad for this guy. He actually wanted just the hardened cams with factory spec, but they ended up being out of stock and we ended up just going with the Stage 2s just to get them back on the road. But there's almost no difference in sound with the stock exhaust setup. If you had long tubes and everything, you have that little chop, a cold start, but this is just a sleeper E63 now. So I'm excited to see how it drives. I'm gonna let it run for a little bit to get everything break in, do an oil change, and get him on his way. He's excited to come pick this up. All right guys, I hope you enjoyed this week's video. That's really, you know, one of the worst case scenarios you can run into with one of these, as long as there's not a total disaster inside. This guy needed cams. The cam phasers were completely shot. Both those things are out of the way for him. He went ahead and refreshed the injectors and the plugs and put a catch can on there. So he's not gonna have any problems with this car for a very, very long time. So if you enjoyed this week's video, please give us a big thumbs up, subscribe, share with your friends, and most importantly, leave a comment by my hard-working, gray-haired best friend Craig down in the comments. Testing, testing. Mic was up. Testing.
Go away. No. Get a water. Get a water and be quiet. Shut the damn door. Pin, new spring, all that good stuff. Get the out, man. The light's on too, isn't it? John.